actually I've known Angela for a long time because Angela and I went to high school together just a few years ago. So you wouldn't notice that, we have kids getting married. I think her daughter's just got engaged recently, and
Yeah.
so congratulations. But I'm so excited. And one of the great things about what we're doing on the webinar front is that we can invite guests like Angela to share their knowledge with us. And I actually, well, she's going to talk a little bit about a program. Let me introduce her a little. She's a board certified obesity medicine physician practicing in Olympia, Washington. And over the last 12 years, she's helped thousands of people get healthier, lose weight, and make lasting changes in their health and their eating habits. I recently, obviously, I'm connected with her through our Facebook, through our friends there, but just following along with her and some of the things she's doing was so exciting to me. So I actually have heard some of this firsthand, and that's why I wanted her to share it with you. I think it's a great story. It takes, thinking about our health just to a different level for me. So I'm excited to have Angela join us this morning, or for her, and share with us the hidden secrets for lasting health. So Angela.
Awesome. Thanks, Renee. So I'm super, super excited to be able to do this for you guys today, because there's so much misinformation out there when it comes to how to be healthy and how to lose weight, how to get this done. And this is all I do. And so I have a really unique perspective. And so I'm excited to share that with you today. So let me see here. See if I can get, okay. So I'm going to show you today how to make the ultimate shift in how you think about and approach your health. Because I want you to feel good about your body. I want you to feel comfortable in your clothes. I want you to get excited about being able to keep up with your kids or your grandkids. And I want you to feel like you've got control of your life again. So many of us feel out of control. And so I'm going to be teaching you 3 secrets that I've discovered that even most doctors never even think about when it comes to health and weight loss. And I'm going to give you some tips and tricks for how you can stop crazy fad dieting and really make your health a priority. So many of us have gone on these crazy diets and we don't realize just how destructive they are. And so I want to help you get out of that mentality, start understanding what's going on so that you can be a healthy person. I'm committed to playing all out for the next 60 minutes, and I'm really going to dial in on the 3 hidden secrets to lasting health, because I want you to know that so many people are going about doing this the wrong way. I'm going to show you a completely new way to think about this. And it's really going to blow your mind, okay? So you will understand science, and you'll understand a lot more about the psychology of all of this, and you'll understand why all those diets that you've been on in the past haven't worked. And I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that your time spent here is well worth it, and I promise to show you how you can learn more, okay? So I'm a medical doctor, and I specialize in this largely unknown field of medicine called obesity medicine, okay? So, hang on here. So I've got 12 years of experience in obesity medicine. I've worked with thousands of patients, and helping people lose weight and restore their health is the only thing I do. So I don't do anything else in my medical practice other than this, okay? I absolutely love my work because we get results. And these are some photos of just a few of my patients. So there's Christine. Below Christine is Sheila. And then on the right-hand side is Crystal and Rachel. And I want you to notice something about these ladies. So you notice that there's weight loss, sure. But can you see what else has changed about them? Notice how much more confident and happy they look. Notice that they just seem to feel more easy in their bodies. They pose differently, they carry themselves differently, they hold themselves differently, they move their arms more. What they're wearing is brighter and sexier and more form-fitting and more vibrant. So these women have each made dramatic transformations, and now they're totally different people. So it's way more than weight loss. And what I like to say is I get to watch people come back to themselves. I get to watch them return to who they really are. I can't imagine a better job. Can you? Like, this is amazing fun. So I don't talk about how many pounds they lost, because this isn't about their weight. This is about how they feel in their bodies, in their clothes, and in their lives. So the diet and weight loss industry has gone amok in this country. They prey on women in particular. They make them feel unhappy about their bodies, and they sell them these crazy low-calorie shakes and bars, expensive meals, gym memberships, the whole bit. And we fall for it. We spend thousands, tens of thousands of dollars, and sometimes even more than that, trying to lose weight and restore our health. So think about everything that you might have done in the past. And so from now on, we're going to think about all that stuff as the old way. Okay. The old way is a diet. And just think about how many diets you might have tried. Maybe it was Weight Watchers. Maybe it was doing HCG shots, or maybe it was Jenny Craig meals, or maybe you tried fasting, starving yourself for days on end. Maybe you got into a really strict exercise regimen, and you found out that exercise didn't really cause all that much weight loss. Maybe you even signed up for a half marathon. I've had patients who've done half marathons and marathons, and they've said, I lost 10 pounds. So maybe even went as far as to get a lap band. People do all kinds of things to try to get this problem under control. And trust me, I have seen all of it. So with these old outdated approaches, you can sometimes lose weight and get healthy for a period of time, but invariably, people will regain their weight back. Usually what happens is they end up gaining more because the diet destroys their metabolism. And then they end up feeling humiliated and defeated. And one patient said to me so pointedly, she said, and I'm quoting her, she said, the worst part is that everyone could see that I'd once again failed. She just felt demoralized and humiliated. And so we end up in this lose gain cycle that really, really erodes our self-esteem and our confidence. Over time, the problem gets worse, and it gets harder and harder to control. That's what happens with dieting. So the problem doesn't get better, it just gets worse. So I have a question. Is it possible that there's not actually something wrong with us as people who are trying to get healthy, but it's the real problem is with the diets and the crazy exercise plans and the whole approach that we're taking? Is it possible that these crazy weight loss plans could actually be making the problem worse? And that answer is obviously yes, absolutely. This whole idea of starving ourselves thin and beating ourselves up with crazy calorie burning exercise regimens, this idea that is popularized in women's magazines and diet programs out there all over the place, it is totally flawed, it's dangerous, and it's making us actually gain weight in the long run. So let's throw out that, okay? So I'd like to suggest that we begin to think about getting healthy in a new way, a more accurate way, a scientific way, right? Because I'm a doctor, I'm a highly trained specialist, I'm a scientist, okay? So I want to teach you a new paradigm, okay? So this is not a willpower problem or a character defect. People are not lazy or unmotivated. None of that is going on, okay? There's none of that happening. Weight gain is a manifestation of a disease. This is a disease with far-reaching complications. And that's what we have now come to understand from the science of it. obesity as a disease. And as a matter of fact, in 2013, the American Medical Association finally made a proclamation that the science is clearly showing us that this is a disease. Okay, so this is a disease that you can learn how to manage, but you can't manage this disease with quick fix, crazy dieting and exercise regimens. That actually makes the disease worse. When we starve our body, we tell it to slow down. Our bodies want to survive. We are evolved to survive. So if we drop our calorie intake too low, we put our body in a famine state, and its energy output is going to stall. We get exhausted, we get cranky, we get miserable, and then our bodies are going to hang on to fat later. And so we don't want to do that. And trust me, I have done that in the past. I have done crazy dieting, and I have really put my body in horrible states of famine, to the point where I didn't even have a period for months and months and months. And I thought that was the way to do it. Okay, so we don't want to do that anymore. We want to learn how to manage this disease for the long haul. So that's how you want to start thinking about this. Okay, so as you learn how to manage the disease, you lose weight. That's just an awesome side effect, okay? That's how you want to think about this. But so many other things happen too. So I have patients tell me all the time, their joint pain goes away or it diminishes greatly. Their sleep apnea gets better. Many of my patients get off their CPAP machines. I don't know if you know with sleep apnea and the CPAP machines that people have to wear to make sure that they've got enough pressure to keep their throats open while they're sleeping. High blood pressure will come down. Diabetes comes under much better control. Many of my diabetic patients who are taking insulin can actually get off insulin. There's so much going on with this disease. It's a very complicated disease, but it is a disease that can be managed. So can you see how this changes everything? Okay, no more crazy diets, no worries about some fundamental willpower flaw. You just learn how to manage the disease. You get healthy and you lose weight in the process. Once you begin to think about obesity as a disease, the question becomes, how do I manage the disease? Sort of like if you've been diagnosed with asthma, you learn how to manage your asthma. For example, you don't smoke. You may take some medications. Or if you've been diagnosed with sleep apnea, you use your PAP machine. Or if you've been diagnosed with high blood pressure, you might need to take some high blood pressure medications. You avoid salt and you exercise regularly. Okay, so obesity is the same thing. It's a disease that you learn how to manage. You stop the crazy diets, you learn what to eat and how to manage your life so that you can keep this disease under control. Okay. Now, I realized that this is not a common paradigm, okay? And I also realized that I wanted to do more for my patients than what I can actually do in the office. So I decided to use the power of the internet to teach, to give people an entirely new way to think about losing weight and getting healthy. And that's what I'm going to do for you today. Okay, so I'm going to give you a step-by-step blueprint for lasting health today. If you follow these steps in order, your chances of succeeding are going to be much, much higher than they'd otherwise be. And remember, most people, not even those diet gurus out there, don't understand this. They're fighting with themselves all day, every day, trying to get this under control. Nobody understands that this is a disease that can be managed. So to begin with, I'm going to teach you 3 hidden secrets that almost no one understands. And for the first one, I have to say we didn't even discuss this very much at the last obesity medicine conference I was at. So a lot of my colleagues don't truly understand this, okay? So what is it? Secret number 1, are you ready? It's about processed food. In particular, it's about sugar. Here's what the research shows. Sugar is a highly addictive drug. In animal studies, it's actually 8 times more addictive than cocaine. Okay, so I want you to let that sink in. 8 times more addictive than cocaine. And in my experience, flour is equally addictive. So flour counts too. Wheat flour, rice flour, oat flour, but especially white flour, heavily processed white flour. Human studies show that 20% of people show addictive tendencies to foods made from processed sugar and flour. So foods like pizza, candy, chips, bread, pasta, cake, cookies, ice cream, sodas, energy drinks, specialty coffees, fast food. Okay. I think that the number is actually higher because the way they classified addiction in these studies is really, really conservative. They were worried about over classifying people as food addicts. What I see is that a lot of people really have strong tendencies towards addiction to these foods. So even in my obesity medicine conferences, we don't really even talk about these as addictive drugs. We talk about how, yeah, people need to stop eating processed foods, and we talk about how they need to be careful with carbs and sugar, but we actually don't talk about the fact that what we're dealing with is actually what I've come to call an edible drug. Okay, so think about that for a minute. Let that sink in. These foods are actually edible drugs. And I like to ask my patients, think about what your edible drug of choice is. We all have different things to respond to that we respond to. For example, some people, their edible drugs are sugar in combination with caffeine. So it's going to be sodas and energy drinks and coffee drinks. For some people, it is sugar in combination with fat. So it's more like chocolate and ice cream. For some people, it's not sugar at all, it's flour products. So it's bread and pasta. Some people, for me, it's a combination of sugar and flour. So it's the baked goods. So it's like cake will drive me crazy. Cookies, brownies, baked goods, those kinds of things. So everybody has what I call their edible drug of choice. And so what is it that you respond to? And if you want to do something interesting, just type in the chat what you think. If you feel like you might have some addictive tendencies to these foods, type in what it is that you might find as your edible drug of choice. And we can just kind of see the variety. And unfortunately, there I can see the chat. Okay. Okay, so go ahead and type it in the chat if you have an edible drug of choice. Like I said, mine is cake. So white flour, bread, and pasta, says Linnea. Ice cream for Melissa. White cake and French fries. I can skip desserts anytime, but I love carbs like bread and pasta. I hear that a lot, Kelly. Definitely lattes. So the lattes are sugar and caffeine. Pasta and ice cream both. Okay, sugar. So I have to carefully limit what I bring into the house. Yes. And then Carla says candy. Yeah. So for her, it's more like pure sugar. So everybody, again, everybody's brain responds a little bit differently to these foods. So I can leave candy. I couldn't care less. I don't care about chips and bread and pasta. I don't care about it. Just give me the baked goods. So everybody's different. And I have a lot of patients who are addicted to soda or energy drinks. And I have had patients who, it's all day long. It's candy bars and Mountain Dew, so it can be really, really difficult. So just understand, somebody else here says chips, that's their drug. Yeah. Okay, so now I have to go back here, sorry. Okay, so this is Linda. And she's one of my patients. Linda discovered that she was addicted to sugar, okay? She told me she'd been overweight her entire life. She was the fat little kid on the playground and she consoled herself with food. And her mom was a baker. And it's no surprise to her that diabetes runs in her family. She had kids in her 20s and she spent 30 years in and out of Weight Watchers trying to lose weight. And she said even following their plan to the T, she couldn't lose weight. At 60 plus years, she just gave up and resolved herself to being overweight and tired and achy. And then she found me. And when I explained that sugar was the culprit, she was stunned. She started looking for sugar in all kinds of foods. And I will teach you later how to do this. She found sugar in a lot of foods that she thought were healthy. And she discovered that instead of counting calories, cutting out fat, and exercising like a maniac, all she had to do was cut sugar out of her diet. She said it hasn't been difficult. And now her clothes fit and she can bend over without hurting herself. She's gone from a size 14 to a loose size 10. And even some of the clothes that she'd been saving to wear for when she got smaller are now too big for her. I just talked to her a couple of days ago, and she's been sewing. She's down in Mexico. When they let her on the beach, she goes boogie boarding, and she's been altering her clothes so that they'll fit her. So this isn't a bad problem to have, right? And she just didn't understand that she was addicted to sugar. So now I have a problem here because hang on just a minute here. Okay, here. So here's my question for you. Could you be addicted to sugar or flour or both? The telltale signs of addiction are cravings. So if you're craving these foods, candy, ice cream, bread, cereal, pasta, chips, pizza, if you try to stop eating these foods, do you experience withdrawal symptoms like fatigue or irritability or headaches? Do you go out of your way to get certain foods? Okay, that's a telltale sign of addiction. Okay, is it difficult to imagine life without these particular foods? My medical assistant, Marshall, told me recently that when she first started working for me a couple of years ago, she lost about 20 pounds just doing what I told her to do, but she could never think about imagining giving up her coffee with a coffee creamer every morning. So it was the General Foods International coffee creamer, French vanilla flavored. And she said she'd put like this much coffee in it, or this much creamer in it, and the rest was coffee. And she would drink that all morning. She said she could not imagine giving that up. So that was for her a telltale sign that that was something she was addicted to. Okay. Here are some other questions that might help uncover an addiction. If you have a history of addiction to something else, for example, alcohol or nicotine or other drugs, or if you have a family member who has addiction, your brain might be more sensitive. So I just put that out there as a possibility. I find often that people who have struggled with alcohol in the past, their brains are particularly sensitive to sugar. So give me a maybe in the chat box if you think you might be addicted to sugar. And give me a yes in the chat box if you know you are. And again, I use sugar and flour interchangeably. So if you think that you might have any addictive tendencies to these. And again, I just want you to know this is really, really common. And it's something that I think most people realize on some level, but they haven't really thought about all that much, right? I want you to know. So let's see, Madison says, I know I'm addicted to caffeine through coffee. Melissa says yes. Carla says yes, maybe. Okay, so good. So you guys are astute here. That's awesome. So this is a really, really powerful understanding that this is actually a drug and it has addictive qualities. One of my patients heard me say this in class in the months before Christmas. She was actually in on Halloween. And she's someone who bakes, and she makes fudge every year at Christmas time. And she used to sell large amounts of fudge for charity. And when I explained this in class, she said this was such a huge aha for her. And she decided, I can't do this anymore. I cannot pass drugs out at Christmas time anymore. And even if it was making money for charity. So she really took this to heart. This last Christmas, she started making wreaths instead. She loved it. She absolutely loved it. And she loved knowing that she was helping herself and helping other people be healthy, right? So here's a little secret. Diets don't work with addiction. Think about the mentality of being on a diet. It's a short-term restriction in food intake for the sake of weight loss. Once you achieve a certain goal weight, you stop the diet and go back to eating what you consider to be normally. Usually, there are cheat days built into the diet where you allow yourself to eat foods that are otherwise forbidden on the diet, right? So think about this from the standpoint of sugar or flour addiction. Compare this thinking with other addictions. So imagine telling an alcoholic who's gotten sober that it's okay to have a drink on a cheat day, or that it's okay to have a drink during the holidays. That's not going to work, right? Because this is brain chemistry that we're dealing with. There's a sensitivity there that has to be taken into account. And a cheat day with alcohol is going to lead to a relapse. So for many people, not everybody, but for many people, it's the same thing is true with these highly addictive foods. A cheat day leads to more cheats, and before you know it, it's a full-blown relapse. So here's something to think about. How sensitive is your brain? What happens to you when you eat these foods? Think back to the last diet that you went on, and surely you got off these addictive foods. Did you, quote, fall off the wagon, unquote, as soon as you had a splurge? Or were you able to have a little bit and be okay? You have to know your own brain, okay? That's the key here. Not everyone's an alcoholic. Not everyone's brain is super sensitive to sugar and flour, but you need to know your own brain. And if you discover that your brain is one of those brains that's really sensitive, sometimes it's easier to just get off the drug, okay? Now, the one thing that you have to understand about that is you have to take it one day at a time. Anytime if you've ever been to an AA meeting, they always say, I'm not drinking today. I don't know about tomorrow, but I'm not having a drink today. So you have to give your brain something to work with. If you tell your brain you're never, ever, ever going to have a piece of cake again, even if it's your birthday, that's too overwhelming and it's not going to happen. So you just take it one day at a time. Okay. So I'm going to stop for a minute and ask how you're feeling about all of this. Give me a yes in the chat box if this is making sense to you. Let me know if how you're feeling about it. Like, yeah, so it is making sense. Okay, good, good. So if you've got a sensitive brain, I want you to know that there's hope. Okay. So I've developed this online course that Renee sort of hinted at. And one of the things that we do in this course is we have a system of support so that you can get off sugar and flour and stay off of it. I also have a Facebook group called Sugar and Flour Busters Society that you're welcome to join. If you want to join it, just go to Facebook groups and type in Sugar and Flour Busters Society. It's a picture of a woman kicking a bunch of junk food away from her. That's how you'll know it's me. And you can join Sugar and Flour Busters Society, and I'm always posting stuff in there. And there's lots of people who are working at getting off sugar and flour. So that would be another way to get the support that you need. It's really going to be hard to manage the disease of obesity unless you first learn how to manage this addiction to these highly processed foods. Okay. And there's plenty of reason for hope. And like Linda, you can do it. I see it all day, every day. Okay. You should also know that the food industry uses this knowledge to your advantage. And I do have some videos in Sugar and Flour Busters Society where I talk about exactly what the food industry does to make sure that they put just the right amount of added sugar in foods to really trigger the dopamine response, which is the pleasure center. Then they experiment to make sure that everything is just right so that you are drawn to these foods and you can't stay away. So, and I have a handout that I will forward to Renee, and she can forward it to you, called 5 Dirty Little Secrets of the Food Industry, so that you can read about some of the marketing techniques and tactics that the food industry does to make sure that you stay addicted. Okay. They worked very, very hard at hijacking our brains. The more you know, the better you can protect yourself from their sly ways. Okay, so that's just secret number 1. Sugar is a really addictive drug. So let's move on to secret number 2. which is it's not about fat. It's about insulin. So if you want to get healthy, forget about tracking calories and fat. It turns out that they don't matter as much as we thought they did, okay? As it turns out, it's about the insulin that your pancreas produces. So let me unpack this for you. So insulin is a hormone that's secreted by the pancreas. I am not sure why there are little annotations coming up there, but we'll figure that out. But insulin has 3 jobs. Insulin's first job is to bring your blood sugar down after you eat. So you eat something, your insulin's going to get produced to bring your blood sugar down. Its second job is to store fat. Here we go, store fat. And its third job is to prevent fat burning. So when insulin is high in your bloodstream, fat is going to go into fat cells, and it's a one-way door into fat cells, and it's going to prevent fat from coming out of fat cells. So I want you to imagine that when you're eating what I call the standard American diet or SAD food, our insulin levels have to run really, really high because there's so much carbs and sugar. And so our insulin levels run really, really high. Can you imagine all that stress that's happening to our pancreases? Okay. Now, like a top-notch surgeon, insulin is really, really good at its job. It is precise. It's really precise at storing fat, and it guards fat cells like crazy, doing everything possible to prevent fat from coming out of fat cells. So what that means is that when your insulin levels are high, you're going to store fat, particularly visceral fat, which is the fat that is around the organs inside. You cannot see it, and it is extremely dangerous. When our insulin levels are high, we can't burn that fat, okay? Now, insulin creates visceral fat. What you need to understand about visceral fat is that it's a very different kind of fat. So there's normal fat, which is the fat that's underneath the skin. So this fat that's under here that we hate so much, this fat that is on our abdomen, over the abdominal wall, over the abdominal muscles, the fat that's on our hips and thighs, that is all normal fat. And those fat cells are small. Visceral fat cells are large, expanded fat cells. Again, they're located inside the organs. You cannot see them. And these fat cells produce hormones like crazy. And these hormones create inflammation. So what I want you to know is that obesity is a disease of inflammation. So think about all of the complications and all the chronic disease that we see in this country. Arthritis, that is inflammation of the joints. Heart attacks and strokes. What causes heart attacks and strokes is inflammation in the blood vessels that makes them sticky, and then they collect cholesterol, and that's what causes the blockages. Inflammation triggers cancer growth. Inflammation causes asthma. Inflammation causes GERD and reflux. So lots of people come in to see me, and they've got all this indigestion, they've got irritable bowel syndrome, they're feeling crappy all the time. Inflammation causes brain fog. Inflammation can cause autoimmune disorders, and the thyroid gland will get attacked, and so now we have a low thyroid. Inflammation causes skin rashes and skin disorders. So there's a lot going on in terms of what this visceral fat does to us. So inflammation causing heart disease, stroke, cancer, arthritis, asthma. I didn't even mention liver disease. The people who are having to deal with the tsunami of liver disease are overwhelmed with so much liver disease. Visceral fat also causes high blood pressure. It secretes hormones that cause our blood vessels to constrict. So that's what causes high blood pressure. So obviously, these high levels of insulin are toxic to the body, okay? So I want you to really understand that. The other thing that insulin does, it affects the appetite center in the brain. So this is sort of a crazy diagram that I've got here. And what I want you to understand about this is the appetite regulation system in the brain. So this is a very specific part of your brain. Now, think about a baby or a young child. A baby eats because there's a hormone called ghrelin that gets produced. That's the hunger hormone. And I'm going to see if I can, yeah, you can see it here. Okay. So ghrelin is this one right here. See that? And ghrelin is the hunger hormone. And then the major satiety hormone is called leptin. So satiety is the medical word for satisfaction or I'm done eating. So leptin is the major satiety hormone. What we now know about insulin is that it causes what's called appetite dysregulation. So appetite, when your appetite center is working normally, you only eat when your body needs food. Okay, so think about a young child, a baby or a young child. You put food in front of them. They're not members of the Clean the Plate Club yet. They eat what they want and then they start playing with their food and they're done. And even if it's like really delicious, their favorite food, they will stop eating, right? I think about my little kitty. I put her favorite wet cat food out. She just eats what her body needs and then she stops. And I can't make her keep eating. So that's a normal appetite regulation system. What we have now discovered is that insulin affects the brain's appetite regulation system. And insulin actually blocks your brain from seeing leptin, okay? So here's an interesting leptin story if we have time for it. How are we doing on time? We've just got about 15 minutes. Okay. So back in the 1940s, there were these mice that spontaneously developed in a lab, and these mice wouldn't stop eating. And they wouldn't move. Normal mice eat and then they get on a hamster wheel and they're playing around, they're moving, and then they go back and eat a little bit more, a lot like my kitten. And so these mice didn't do that. So they nicknamed these mice the OB mouse, short for obesity, because they gained weight. And they knew that these mice didn't have any problem with laziness because animals, that's not the way it works. They knew there was something wrong, but they just didn't know what. So it wasn't until the 1990s that they discovered, when genetic testing came out, they discovered these mice didn't have the gene for leptin. And so that's why they called it, they named it after the Greek word for thin, which is leptos. Okay, so that's why they named this hormone leptin. So what they did is they manufactured leptin and gave these mice leptin shots and cured them. Like, get enough leptin in, suddenly they're not all that interested in food anymore and they're moving around and they're healthy again. So they started making leptin and giving it to people, thinking that people, yeah, can I get a leptin shot, says Colin. Yes, exactly. But they discovered that that didn't work for people. So then they started measuring how much leptin people had, and they discovered that people with obesity have actually got more leptin than people who don't have obesity. And that's when they realized that the leptin is coming from fat cells. Okay, it's a feedback loop to the brain. Your brain knows how much fat you have by how much leptin is in your bloodstream. But for whatever reason, in people with obesity, even though there's all this leptin, the brain wasn't seeing it. So that's when some real serious research started going on. And it was in Dr. Robert Lustig's lab at the University of California, San Francisco. He discovered that it was insulin that was blocking leptin in the brain. And this discovery was only made in 2004. So this is, just not that long ago that we discovered insulin blocks leptin in the brain. So the higher your insulin levels, then the less ability you have to sense a sense of fullness. The other thing that I just learned from a webinar with Dr. Lustig is that insulin also prevents the degradation of dopamine. So what's dopamine? Dopamine is a pleasure hormone. There's another part of your brain that, that allows you to feel pleasure from eating when your body needs food. And once your body has had enough food, the dopamine, the pleasure hormone, is supposed to be disintegrated and go away. But that doesn't happen. Insulin blocks that. So this is why we think we've got a willpower problem. We think we're just keeping on eating, even though we know we're feeling satiety, like we're feeling full, but it still tastes good. Okay, it's not supposed to keep tasting good. It's supposed to start tasting bland after a while. So insulin is blocking that too. So think about all of the low-fat diets that you might have been on in the past. Low-fat diet is generally high in carbohydrates, and that is going to cause you to continue to suffer from appetite dysregulation. Okay. So one of the things that I do in my clinic to help people is I use medications to help rebalance the brain's appetite regulation system. I teach them how to bring their insulin levels down, and I'm going to teach you how to do that too. And sometimes we can actually end up getting them off the appetite regulation medications once their insulin levels are down low enough, okay? But some people end up having permanent damage to the brain's appetite regulation system. We're now discovering that the POMC area right here, that the inflammation that is a result of the visceral fat accumulation in obesity can affect where this POMC hits and can cause permanent damage there. So some people need to be on medications and just need to stay on them, just like you would if you had high blood pressure. So is this making sense to people? You have any questions about this so far? Just type in the chat. Let me know that you're getting this and that you're understanding what I'm saying here as far as the appetite regulation system goes. The most important thing that I want you to know is that if you have struggled with food, like there's not a willpower thing going on here. This is brain chemistry. This isn't a willpower issue. Okay. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Let's call it. Okay, great. Awesome. Is there a magic pill? Yeah. So again, one of the things that I do is I use medications that will help to affect the brain's appetite regulation system. They aren't magic pills, no, but they do help you to get that sense of satiety at the right time. And so one of the things that, since you're not in Olympia where I am, one of the things that you might consider doing if you're interested in getting your appetite center under better control is to see a specialist in obesity medicine, because we understand this, we're trained in this. A lot of healthcare professionals don't understand appetite dysregulation at all, and they are still treating their patients as though they've got a willpower issue, and it's totally not the case. Okay, so you want to work with somebody who's specialized in obesity. One thing I do want you to look at is it's what I call sad food. It's very interesting because our food dollars have been, our food spending has changed a lot in the last 30 years, 40 years. Since 1982, you'll see that processed food was pretty low on the list back in the old days. And now we're, way up to number one. Most of our food dollars are spent on processed foods that are very high in carbs and sugar. And they are creating, our bodies they're just really stressing out our pancreas and causing us to produce tons of insulin. And that's what we're seeing as a result, is tons and tons of insulin. So what I want to do for you now is I want to teach you a formula, and I'm going to do this really quickly. Renee, we've only got until 1 o'clock, right?
Yeah, just.
Okay. So really quickly, I'm going to teach you this formula that was taught to me by my colleague, Dr. Alan Rader. And I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. Actually, let me give you parts of it first. So Alan Rader wanted to teach people how to keep their insulin levels low. And he came up with this brilliant idea, because we all know what teaspoons of sugar look like. And he said, okay, let's think about how many teaspoons of sugar that there might be in the bloodstream in the normal fasting state, and how many teaspoons of sugar are in our food. And then if we can figure out how many teaspoons of sugar are in our food, and we know what's in the normal bloodstream, then we can do a calculation, and we'll know how high we're jacking our blood sugar up, and then we can get a pretty good sense of how much insulin our body's going to have to produce. So the first thing that you need to know is how to figure out how many teaspoons of sugar are in your food, okay? To do that, you go to the food label and you look where it says total carbohydrates, and there are 4 types of carbohydrates. The 4 types of carbohydrates are fiber, sugar, starch or complex carbs, and sugar alcohols. Now, not all of those carbs actually get digested into blood sugar. So this is the part where you need to pay attention. Fiber, think about fiber. Fiber, when your body digests it, it moves through you. It does not turn into blood sugar. Okay, so fiber does not count. Sugar, which is obviously the drug, all different kinds of sugar, 61 different types of sugar. Sugar is going to get absorbed directly into your bloodstream. It's going to raise your blood sugar. Sugar counts. Starches, what about starches? Like breads and pastas and rice and potatoes and beans and that kind of stuff. Starches are going to raise your blood sugar. The more processed the starches are, the higher your blood sugar is going to go. So for example, white rice is going to raise your blood sugar quicker than brown rice, but brown rice is still going to raise your blood sugar, okay? So starches count. The last type of carbs are sugar alcohol carbs. Those are man-made sweeteners. Those are sweeteners like xylitol, if you've heard of that, and maltitol and sorbitol. Those actually raise your blood sugar as well, although they raise your blood sugar more slowly, but they still require an insulin response. And we're worried about insulin here. We want to know everything that's going to raise your insulin levels. So you have to count everything except the fiber. So the first part of Dr. Rader's formula is you take the total carbs and you subtract the fiber out. That's going to let you know how many grams of actual sugar there are in that food, okay? The next thing you're going to need to know is how many teaspoons is that, okay? So you do that by taking that total carb minus fiber and divide that number by 5, and that's going to estimate for you how many teaspoons there are in a food, okay? So I'm going to show you a little demonstration here. So I'm going to stop share and hopefully we can get back on share later, okay? All right, so I have here a little demonstration that I use in my class. So this is 5 quarts. So your normal bloodstream is 5 quarts. So if I took all the blood out of you and put it in a container, this is the 5 quarts, okay? And it looks a little bit different on video, but you can kind of see here. A normal blood sugar is 65 to 99. If you calculate that in terms of teaspoons of sugar, which Alan Rader did, a normal blood sugar turns out to be about 1/2 to 1 teaspoon. So here's sugar, 1/2 to 1 teaspoon in the entire 5 quarts of blood. Now, I was really surprised at that. I was actually shocked. I thought maybe there were 4 or 5 teaspoons of sugar in the bloodstream in the normal fasting state, but it's only 1/2 to 1. And I want you to know a diabetes blood sugar is 1 1/4 teaspoon. This is how tightly regulated this is, okay? So here's what I was doing every morning. I had a bagel and orange juice every morning. I thought I was doing myself a really good healthy meal. Bagel, low fat, healthy carbs, orange juice, lots of vitamin C. I was shocked when I looked at the label on the bagel. The bagel label said it had, do you want to guess how many teaspoons of sugar? Just type in there how many teaspoons, how many teaspoons of sugar might have been in that bagel. Throw it in the chat. Excuse me. Somebody says 30, 10, 4, 5. You guys are good. 20? Okay. You guys are good. Okay. 8? Awesome. So here's what my food label said. Total carbs was 71 and fiber was 2. So you take 71, you subtract 2, that's 69. Call it 70. Take 70, divide it by 5. That's actually 14. Okay, so I was eating 14 teaspoons of sugar every morning. 3, 4, 5, 6. Think about all the insulin, guys. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So there's 14 teaspoons of sugar first thing in the morning. And then the orange juice was another 10 teaspoons of sugar. So that's 24 teaspoons of sugar first thing in the morning, okay? You can imagine how high my blood sugar went and how much insulin my body had to produce. So I was making visceral fat, okay? And then that's so much insulin, my blood sugar would crash. Now I got a low blood sugar. What do you suppose how do I feel if I've got a low blood sugar?
You want to eat?
You want to eat what?
Carb.
Yeah, so what did I do? I worked at the state health department at the time. I was off to go get a muffin or a donut or something to bring my blood sugar back up, right? That's how that works. And so then my blood sugar would come back up, I'd feel better, and then about noon, I'd have another crash. And there was a McDonald's right across the street. So I was offered a burger and fries and a Diet Coke, because you know you got to save calories somewhere, right? So burger, fries, and a Diet Coke every day at lunch. Blood sugar came back up again, and I felt better. And then I'd have another crash mid-afternoon, and then I would get a granola bar. Now, I didn't know granola bars are full of sugar. Just go look at the labels and find out how high of sugar granola bars are. It's crazy. So blood sugar came back up. I was okay until dinner time. Now at dinner time, I would do this whole thing where I would go buy chicken and vegetables and stuff, and I'd have this idea of making a bunch, you know, a nice healthy stir fry. But you know, when your blood sugar's low like that, that's the last thing you want to do. So what do? We get pizza, or I'd get chicken nuggets out for the kids and barbecue sauce, just find out how much sugar's in that. And think about kids, by the way, they don't have 5 quarts to dissolve, they don't have 5 quarts of blood to dissolve their carbs in. So a normal blood sugar for a child, say a 10-year-old, is probably, you know, like 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon. So you give a kid a can of soda with roughly 7 teaspoons of sugar in a can of soda, that's the same as 14 teaspoons for you and I. It's a lot of sugar. And think about what we're feeding our children. Okay, our children are so over-sugared all the time. It is really hard to watch. Once you know what's going on, it's really hard to watch. So, so that's how that happens. Up, down, up, down, up, down all day. I think I've got a willpower problem. I'm exhausted all the time. I can't figure out why I can't lose weight. You know, it's just like, it's craziness. So let me go back to my presentation here. Hopefully this will work. Good. Okay, great. So, so that's my blood sugar roller coaster ride. Okay. What's going on here is over time, people develop what's called insulin resistance. So in order to understand insulin resistance, you have to understand normal insulin function. And so what I have diagrammed here is from my other presentation. Usually it's animated, but I'll just do it without the animation. This is a blood sugar molecule. This is an insulin molecule. This is the bloodstream, and this is, say, a muscle cell. And the muscle cell is going to have insulin receptors in it. I diagram them like Pac-Man because I want you to remember them. And what happens is the insulin and the insulin receptor come together like a lock and a key. And that is what opens up this channel, and the sugar will go into the cell, and that's what brings your blood sugar down. Okay? Now remember, when your insulin levels are that high from eating that much carbs and sugar, you're also going to make visceral fat too. Okay? Now what happens over time, after decades of bombarding our body with the standard American diet, we end up with insulin resistance. So what that means is basically your Pac-Man have stopped working. Okay? So the pancreas is still producing insulin, and so you're still making visceral fat, but the blood sugar isn't coming down because this reaction isn't happening and the blood sugar channels aren't opening up. So what we see is that gradually over time, people's blood sugar starts going up and up and up, and then eventually you reach a magic number where you get labeled a diabetic. And that's where the A1C is at 6.5. An A1C of 5.7 and above means that you've got blood sugar starting to rise. And what I want you to know is that our high school students these days, 25% of them are showing signs, that's 1 in 4 high school students, guys, are showing signs of insulin resistance and blood sugar already starting to rise at that young age. And we've got an epidemic of adult onset type 2 diabetes among our children. And we are screening 10-year-olds for type 2 diabetes, 10-year-olds. So this is what's going on in this country as a result of, you know, the food marketing and all the crap that's in our standard American diet. And it's not just here in the States, it's all over the world. There's a worldwide epidemic of diabetes, and 1 in 4 diabetics lives in China. Okay. So a lot of that's because there's so many people in China, but the other piece of that is, you know, we've exported Kentucky Fried Chicken and McDonald's and Starbucks and everything all over the world. So So what do? If you want to get yourself healthy again, I want you to think about insulin. Insulin matters. And so bring insulin levels down. My rule of thumb is no more than 10 to 15 teaspoons worth of carbs a day. So you might want to write that down. Stay less than 1 teaspoon at breakfast so that you keep your blood sugar stable at breakfast. No more than about 5 teaspoons at a time. Watch and start doing this formula. You're going to be shocked when you find out what's in stuff. Okay. Real quick, I'm going to go through the third secret. So I got this for the second secret, the key to lasting health is managing insulin. The third secret is, you ready? This is important. Lasting weight loss requires deeper skills than just going on a diet. One of my patients told me recently, 90% of my eating decisions are emotional. Okay. So give me a yes in the chat box if you feel like you might be an emotional eater. That is super, super common. Super common. So here's the deal. You can know intellectually all about insulin and all about carbs and all about staying off sugar and all of that. But if you're upset and that's the only way that you know to comfort yourself, you're going to go for it. You just are. And we've grown up learning to soothe ourselves with candy and cake and cookies and chips and all of that. We've grown up learning that. And so, and especially, you know, like right now we're in the middle of this COVID crisis and people are bored and people are frustrated. And there's just a lot of people that are eating a lot more than they usually do because of that, because of all of the emotional upset that they're experiencing. And a lot of people are getting what I call a case of the buckets, which just take the B off and change that to an F, and you know what I'm saying. So they're just like, I just can't handle this anymore bucket. And they just are eating like crazy. And so you get into this sort of pattern, you know, you should be eating wholesome and healthy foods, but you just don't care anymore. And so if that's what you have been feeling, I want you to know that I totally get it, that that's normal, that there's nothing wrong with you. But I also want you to know that you're here and you're learning, okay? And so I know that you've got something brought you to come to this gathering today. Something called you. And so that means that you're wanting to make a change. Colette says, is it really all about the food, or let me see here, or does exercise help? Exercise helps to, that's a really good question. Exercise helps to keep insulin resistance under better control. Exercise helps your muscle cells need more energy so they keep their insulin receptors open better. But it's not about calorie burning the way we think. The other thing exercise does is it keeps us more emotionally stable so that we're less likely to emotionally eat. We're less likely to stress eat. So that's the benefit of exercise. But when it comes to weight loss, I always tell my patients, if you want to get healthy, you got to focus on the food first. You can't keep eating a bunch of junk food and go to the gym and try to burn the calories off. It doesn't work like that, okay? When it comes to emotional eating, I want you to know that you have to have some skills in place in order to make a change in the way that you're managing your emotions. It's totally possible. It takes practice and it takes patience with yourself, and it takes a community of support, okay? You need to have other people that know what you're going through. You can't really do it on your own. You need a community of support. And that's what I've developed in the program that I have called Journey Beyond Weight Loss. It's a whole community of people who are working at developing all of these deeper skills so that they can learn how to manage their emotions without resorting to addictive junk food to do it. And I wanted to show you, hang on here. So this is from module 4 of the online program. We work with what we call the emotional scale. And so I'm helping people learn what their emotions are and learn how to move up the scale. Oops, let me get that out of the way. There we go. So the bottom of the scale is depression and despair, and the top of the scale is love and appreciation and joy. And there are all of these emotions in between. And learning how to move yourself up the scale is a huge, huge key, because the truth of the matter is it's going to be really hard to maintain your health if you're walking around in chronic states of negative emotion. Now, we all have periods of time where, you know, life throws curveballs at us and we might drop into stuff. Like I would say COVID is a nice curveball, and a lot of us are hanging out here in overwhelm or anxiety. But for the most part, you want to be somebody who's hanging out in contentment or peace or optimism or hope or belief or knowing. You want to be somebody who is hanging out in pretty high states of emotion most of the time, with the occasional dip, not where you're down here most of the time and you have the occasional coming up into the higher emotional states, okay? And you can do this by learning how to think, because the thoughts that you think are going to cause your emotional state of being. So you can learn how to shift what you're thinking. And Renee, do I have time to go through just a little, like how much more time can I keep going for a little bit longer?
Yeah, I would say people who need to drop off, you know, of course, they feel free to go.
Okay.
The recording, keep going, because the recording will have the rest. But
Okay.
those
Great.
who can stay,
Awesome.
keep talking. We
Yeah,
love.
if you can stay, that's great. Because
Okay.
I have a really good example for you. So I have a daughter, and her name is Jenna. And Jenna is an avid hiker backpacker type. And Jenna hiked the Pacific Crest Trail, which goes from Mexico to Canada. It's 2,260 miles. She did that in 2013. In 2017, she decided to hike the Continental Divide Trail, which is also, you know, over 2,500 miles. But the Continental Divide Trail turned out to be like the Pacific Crest Trail is training ground for the Continental Divide Trail. So the Continental Divide Trail is up high in the Rocky Mountains. She started in Canada and went down to Mexico. She left in June of 2017, and she was finished in November of 2017. So here it is, June of 2017. And I had kind of a hard time with the Pacific Crest Trail because this is my baby and she's by herself, and you know, I'm her mother and I'm worried. But I realized pretty quickly on the Pacific Crest Trail, there's so many people on the trail that if she were to get into trouble, she would have help readily available. On the Continental Divide Trail, totally different story. You can go for days without seeing anybody. And there are grizzly bears and there's weather to deal with. It's very high elevation. There are drop-offs. I mean, I was just going crazy. And I was getting into what I call my edible drugs of choice, which for me, chocolate and wine. And I was drinking a lot of wine and eating a lot of chocolate. And I finally realized I can't keep doing, like, I can't spend my life worried about this child this whole time. Because, let me go back. I don't know why this goes over the top of it. I was down in worry most of the time, and sometimes downright fear if I allowed my thoughts to go to a grizzly bear or something. I was down in downright fear. But I was mostly anxious and worried, and finally I decided I can't keep doing this. So here's what I did to change my emotional state. I started recognizing the thoughts that I was thinking that were causing me distress, and I changed them. And this takes sort of vigilance about your thoughts. So I started to think to myself, okay, so my daughter loves the outdoors. She lives to be in the outdoors. This is a wonderful challenge for her. She's going to have an incredible sense of pride when she crosses that border in Mexico in November. She's going to be seeing things that the rest of us are never going to get to see. She does search and rescue. She knows the outdoors. She knows what to do if she sees a grizzly bear. She's not going to fall off a cliff. She is an awesome kid. She's got this licked. She wouldn't do it. And we've got a GPS and we know exactly where she is every night. And after a while, I just developed this incredible sense of pride in who she is as a person. Kind of gets me choked up, you know, it's like, wow. And I was looking forward to her trip reports. She would be writing things and taking pictures and sending us text pictures of her journals. And it just became something really exciting instead of something to be scared about. So I shifted my emotional state from anxiety to belief and knowing of her wellness and expectation of her well-being. And then I didn't need the drugs anymore, right? So that's kind of what we teach you how to do in Journey Beyond Weight Loss. Is, I mean, we have a whole bunch of different processes. This is just one of them, but we really help you kind of get at the underlying stuff that's going on under the food, so that you can really address this. And that really is secret number 3, is understanding. Like, this is about way more than just what to eat, how much of it to eat, how to avoid carbs, all that stuff. There's way more to it than just that scientific knowledge and the nutrition piece. There's also an understanding that there needs to be a transformation in the way you think as well. So that is the beauty of the online program, because I can't do that with my patients in the office. So that's why I developed the online program. So, okay, so that makes sense. So those are the 3 secrets. So we've covered a lot. So let's just talk for a minute and we'll just review what we talked about, because I just gave you a whole bunch of stuff. We've talked about how obesity is not a character flaw or a willpower defect. It's a disease that can be managed. And that if you want to manage your health and you want to manage this disease, that you have to understand that there is a drug in our food. There's a drug in our so-called food, and that is sugar and processed flour. And some people's brains are super, super sensitive to that. And if you have one of those really sensitive brains, that's something to really understand, okay? I know I sure have one of those really sensitive brains. We've busted through the low-fat myth, and we've talked about managing insulin as a way to making sure that you stay healthy. We've recognized that for lasting health and weight loss, deeper skills are needed. Understanding your emotions, for one. Lots of other skills are needed, and these are the skills of resilience that are never talked about in most diet programs out there. So if you're interested in lasting health, you can't just go on another diet. That's way too simplistic. An eating plan is a really good starting point, but it takes a lot more thought than that. It takes developing lasting habits that serve you. It takes developing emotional resilience. So those are the secrets to lasting health. What's the max number of teaspoons of sugar consumed per day? I would say about 15 teaspoons a day would be the max. So that's about 75 grams once you cut out the fiber part of it. So remember, fiber does not get turned into blood sugar, so it's not going to cause an insulin rise. So that's good. If anybody else have any other questions, I'm going to open this up for questions, and go ahead and write your questions in the chat. Okay. So hopefully, Mandy, that made sense to you. So about 75 grams of carbs a day. Again, less than 1 teaspoon at breakfast, which means less than 5 net carbs at breakfast. So even a piece of toast is probably too much for most people. Definitely not any juices. Be careful with breakfast smoothies, that kind of thing. Melissa has to go. See you. Thanks for joining us, Melissa. What do I think of intermittent fasting? Oh, that's a good question. So intermittent fasting, the research is mixed on that. And so I would not do intermittent fasting unless you have a way of looking at your body composition. So I have in my office a body composition scale, which is, it tells us exactly how much body fat you're losing. It also tells us what's going on with your muscle mass. The problem with intermittent fasting is that many people, they're losing fat, but they're also losing muscle along with it during these long periods of fast. And I don't know from one person to the next how your body is going to respond to intermittent fasting. So my rule of thumb is you do a body composition before you start the fast, and then you do a month of fast, and then you do your body composition after a month, and we see. Because some people, it works amazing. They burn fat like crazy. They don't burn off their muscle mass. Other people, they're just burning muscle mass. And I can't predict who's who. I don't have any blood tests to figure out who's going to do well with intermittent fasting. So hopefully that answered that question. How do you start? First week, what do you do? Colette, I will give Renee another document that I have, which is a 5-day sugar detox menu. and I will give you that. And so then you can get started getting off of sugar, and that will give your brain a reset. So I'm gonna give you 3 documents, Renee. One of them is the 5 hidden secrets of the food industry. Another one is going to be how to get off sugar and flour. And then the third document is going to be the sugar detox menu. Okay. So Sandra, you have to go. Okay, great. Nice to have you on. Thank you. So I'll give you those 3 documents so that you can get people started on getting off of sugar and getting things going. And then if you're interested in Journey Beyond Weight Loss, I will give you I'm opening up registration for Journey Beyond Weight Loss too. Hang on here. And so we're not quite ready. We will be ready tomorrow. But if you just go to this website, journeybeyondweightloss.com/yes, then you'll be able to join. So Journey Beyond Weight Loss is a 6-module, 12-week online course and membership. And I'm going to be starting the course May 19th. It's Tuesday. We do our calls Tuesday nights at 5:30 Pacific, Central Time at 7:30. And they're group calls. We have a 1-week break in there in the middle of it. But that will give you a really good jump start too, if you want to start learning some of these other deeper skills. You got a lot of module 2 today already, the physical healing module, but there's a whole bunch of other really great modules, and just a lot of everything I could think of that could really help people that just isn't really understood very well. So it's all there. So good. Any other questions at all? I don't see any other questions in the comments. So if you have one real quick, type it in. Otherwise, I think that's it. Linnea says, thank you.
All right. Well, thanks, Angela, and everyone for being with us and staying with us. I mean, I personally have been through this thing she meant, the Journey Beyond Weight Loss, because I realized for me, I needed to figure out what was missing. And so I wanted to share this with you guys because it's a powerful thing. I think in our programs, we often talk about our mental health and mindfulness, and it spends a lot of time about that because it's all about how it all kind of comes together. But thanks for joining us. Don't forget Dr. Zechmann and your knowledge and just your passion for the subject is very empowering for all of us.
Well, see, and Colette says, finally understand what is going on with me. Absolutely. See, this is what's going on. I hear this all day, every day. I finally get it. And understanding it is one thing. Doing it is a totally different thing. But at least when you understand what's going on, it makes so much crystal clear sense that it makes it a lot easier. So that's great. I'm glad, Colette. I hear this a lot. Thank God I finally get it. Yeah. So,
I told Angela that I could do well and I could do that diet thing for a while, but I think the mental fatigue of it, and then I always told myself I failed weight loss, and you know, the one thing she'll tell you is it's not about, you're not failing, and that that's kind of also not helping us. So, you know, a lot of learning that she's already taught me about my health journey, because that's my focus now, to be healthy and manage life better. So, but thanks everyone. Thank you again. And also don't forget everyone, we got some great programs next week. Monday, we have the second session of the 2020 Rise, my plan for a fulfilling life. So it's not too late to get in that 5-part series. I mean, there's a little catch up, but there's a package modules and packages that go with kind of what we talked about in the first week. So definitely check that out. And we're going to talk a little bit about podcasting. And next week, or coming up and later in June, is the Give Me 5 with Deanne King. I think that's going to be fabulous. So check out the calendar. We want to see you guys more often. And don't forget, we have our virtual happy hour this afternoon. So hope to see some of you there. Thank you, everyone.